The massive Imperial scout ship hung in the darkness of space, its sensors focused on the blue-green planet below. Captain Mark Davis of Earth's Space Defense Force watched the alien vessel through his command center's main screen, his hands gripping the console tightly. This wasn't humanity's first contact with alien life, but it was definitely the most intimidating. "They're scanning our entire planet," reported Tom, the sensor officer. "Military installations, power plants, population centers, everything." The Imperial ship was 3 times larger than Earth's biggest spacecraft. Its golden hull reflected sunlight like a metallic sunrise, and its design spoke of advanced technology that humans could only dream of. Yet Captain Davis noticed something in their movement patterns. Arrogance. The kind of arrogance that comes from never losing a fight. 3 days later, the first meeting between Earth's representatives and the Galactic Empire took place in the United Earth Government building in Geneva. The Imperial delegates stood tall, their silvery uniforms gleaming under the conference room lights. Their leader, Commander Rex, spoke through a translation device. "Your world now stands at the edge of Imperial space," Rex announced, his voice carrying no emotion. "The Empire spans 10,000 star systems. Your addition to our realm is inevitable. Resist, and you will be crushed like all others before you." General Alice Wright, Earth's chief negotiator, stayed calm. She'd been chosen for her diplomatic skills, but also for her understanding of human history. "Commander Rex, we understand your empire is powerful, but we strongly advise you to research human history before making threats." Rex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "History? Your species hasn't even colonized your own solar system properly. What could we possibly learn from such primitives?" "We learn fast," General Wright replied. "And we adapt even faster. Throughout our history, bigger armies with better technology have tried to conquer those they considered inferior. They all learned a hard lesson." The Imperial officers exchanged amused glances. One of them, a younger officer, actually snickered. "Let me be clear," Wright continued. "Earth doesn't want war. We're willing to discuss trade, cultural exchange, even alliance. But we will not submit to conquest. This is your only warning." Commander Rex stood up, his full height impressive. "Warning. You dare warn the Empire? We who have conquered a quarter of the galaxy." He pointed at the human delegation. "Your primitiveness shows in your boldness. We offered you a chance to submit peacefully. Now you will learn why no one refuses the Empire." As the Imperial delegation turned to leave, General Wright spoke one last time. "We've studied your Empire's expansion patterns. You've only faced civilizations that were either too peaceful to fight back effectively or too divided to stand united. Humanity is different. We've spent our entire history fighting ourselves, improving our weapons, developing strategies. Now imagine all that knowledge and experience turned against a common enemy." Rex paused at the door but didn't turn around. "You have 1 Earth week to reconsider. After that, we will demonstrate true power." After the Imperials left, Captain Davis turned to General Wright. "They're not going to listen, are they?" "No," she replied, looking out the window at the sunny Geneva afternoon. "They're too used to easy victories. But we've faced their kind before. Different faces, same attitude." Within hours, Earth's military went into high alert. Factories switched to wartime production, and the Space Defense Force began deploying its ships in defensive positions. Scientists worked around the clock, studying the scan data they'd gathered from the Imperial ship. "Look at their ship design," said Dr. Bill Parker, lead military scientist, pointing at the holographic display. "All their weapons face forward. They're used to enemies who run away or fight head-on. They've never faced anyone who fights dirty." Captain Davis smiled. "Then they're in for a surprise. How long until the new stealth systems are ready?" 3 days. "We've been preparing for something like this since we first reached space. They think we're primitive because we don't have their technology. They don't realize we've been designing weapons specifically to fight advanced aliens. In orbit, the Imperial scout ship continued its arrogant patrol, unaware that beneath them, humanity was preparing not just to defend, but to fight back with everything they had. They had tried to warn the Empire. Soon, they would show them why that warning should have been heeded. The week-long deadline approached, and Earth waited. Not in fear, but in determination. The Empire was about to learn why picking a fight with humans was the biggest mistake they'd ever made. The Imperial fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of golden arrows, their massive ships blocking out the stars. Admiral Peter Jackson watched from Earth's orbital command station as over 300 enemy vessels positioned themselves in attack formation. The Empire had clearly expected Earth's immediate surrender upon seeing their overwhelming force. They were about to learn their first lesson about humans. "All stealth units in position," reported Lieutenant Mike from his console. "The Empire still hasn't detected them." Admiral Jackson nodded. Earth's smaller ships had been coated with radiation-absorbing material developed from studying the Imperial scout ship's scanning technology. The enemy fleet's sensors swept right past them, seeing nothing but empty space. The Imperial commander's message boomed through all communication channels. "Your time has expired. Surrender now or face annihilation." Jackson pressed the broadcast button. "This is Earth Command. Here's our answer." He nodded to his weapons officer. Suddenly, 30 seemingly empty patches of space lit up with weapon fire. The stealth ships, positioned behind the Imperial fleet, opened fire on the enemy's rear ships. The Empire's supposedly superior vessels had a critical weakness. Their shield generators were all placed at the front, expecting attacks only from that direction. "Multiple enemy ships disabled," Mike announced, excitement in his voice. "Their formation is breaking." The Imperial fleet scattered in confusion. They'd never encountered an enemy that would attack from behind. Their massive ships tried to turn around, but they were too slow, too clumsy. Earth's smaller vessels darted between them, firing precisely at weak points. "Now for Phase 2, Jackson ordered. From Earth's surface, hundreds of small, fast attack craft launched. These weren't military vessels. They were modified civilian ships, racing boats and cargo haulers retrofitted with weapons and armor. The Empire's targeting systems, designed to track large military vessels, struggled to lock onto these irregular targets. In the chaos, Captain Lisa Brown led her squadron of converted racing ships straight through the enemy formation. Remember, she radioed to her pilots, just like the simulations. They can't hit what they can't predict. Her ships zigzagged wildly, their civilian engines pushing them to speeds that made military pilots sick. They darted between Imperial vessels, dropping specially designed mines that attached to enemy hull plates. The Imperial commander's voice came through again, this time with noticeable anger. "What trickery is this? Fight with honor." "We're not fighting for honor," Jackson replied calmly. "We're fighting to win." The mines detonated, creating localized electromagnetic pulses that shut down ship after ship. The Empire's advanced technology proved to be their weakness. Their complex systems couldn't handle such primitive but effective tactics. On the bridge of the Imperial flagship, Commander Rex watched in horror as his fleet fell into disarray. "Impossible. They're savages. How are they doing this?" Earth's defense forces pressed their advantage. Large military ships emerged from behind the moon, having hidden there since the Imperial ultimatum. They targeted the confused enemy vessels with conventional weapons, while smaller ships continued their harassment tactics. "Sir," Mike called out, "the enemy fleet is retreating. 87 of their ships disabled, 32 destroyed. The rest are falling back." Admiral Jackson watched as the mighty Imperial fleet, which had arrived with such confidence, fled in disorder. Earth had lost only 12 ships, most of them unmanned drones used as distractions. "Send the message," Jackson ordered. All surviving Imperial ships received the transmission. "You came expecting to find primitive savages. Instead, you found humanity. We've spent thousands of years fighting ourselves, perfecting the art of war. Every time you thought you saw our full strength, It was just another deception. This was just a taste of what we can do. Leave now, or the next lesson will be harder. In the aftermath, Earth's forces began salvaging disabled Imperial ships, already studying their technology for weaknesses to exploit. Scientists and engineers worked frantically to understand and improve upon the alien tech. "They'll be back," Captain Brown said as she watched the recovery operations. "And they'll be angry." Admiral Jackson nodded. "Good. Angry enemies make mistakes. And next time, we'll be even better prepared." The first battle against the Galactic Empire was over. Humanity had announced its presence in the galaxy not with diplomacy or submission, but with a victory that would shake the Empire to its core. The message was clear. Earth wasn't just another conquest. It was humanity's home, and they would defend it with every trick, tactic, and deception they had learned through millennia of warfare. The Empire had ignored their warning. Now they would pay the price. 2 months after their first defeat, the Empire still couldn't understand how they were losing ships to what appeared to be space junk. Their mighty warships would approach seemingly abandoned Idris fields, only to have their systems mysteriously fail or their hulls breach from invisible attacks. In a hidden asteroid base, Dr. John Walker examined his latest creation. "It's amazing what you can do with old satellite parts and broken-down ships," he said, holding up what looked like a simple metal sphere. Next to him, Major Emma Ross smiled. "How many of these vacuum mines have we deployed now?" "Over 10,000. The Empire keeps thinking they're just debris from their earlier battles. They never expect simple mechanical devices because they rely too much on complex electronics." The vacuum mines were just one example of humanity's creative approach to warfare. Unable to match the Empire's technology directly, Earth's scientists and engineers had turned to solutions that the Empire's advanced sensors couldn't detect because they were too simple. In Earth's orbit, Admiral Thompson watched the latest battle unfold. The Empire had sent another fleet, bigger than the last, but this time they moved cautiously, checking for stealth ships and ambushes. They had learned from their first defeat, but not enough. "Launch the decoys," Thompson ordered. Hundreds of small objects ejected from Earth's defense platforms. To Imperial sensors, they appeared to be missiles. The Empire's ships immediately raised shields and began evasive maneuvers. "They're falling for it," reported Officer Dan from his station. "Their shields are at maximum power, facing the decoys." "Perfect. Release the infiltrators." While the Empire focused on the fake missile threat, tiny robots smaller than human hands attached themselves to enemy hull plates. These weren't complex AI machines. They were simple mechanical devices, powered by the Empire's own shield energy. They began drilling through the hulls, too small and primitive for the advanced Imperial systems to detect. On the Imperial command ship, alarms suddenly blared. "Hull breach in multiple sections," an officer shouted. "But there's no enemy fire." The Empire had never faced an enemy that would use such basic tactics. Their technological superiority had become their greatest weakness. They couldn't defend against attacks they didn't consider worth detecting. Back on Earth, in an underground factory, workers modified old farming equipment into space-worthy weapons. Fertilizer spreaders became cluster bomb launchers. Irrigation pipes were turned into rail gun barrels. Everything was repurposed for war. "The Empire expects high-tech weapons," explained Chief Engineer Bill Parker as he supervised the work. "They're not prepared for kinetic weapons that just punch holes in their ships. No fancy energy shields can stop a piece of metal moving at high speed." The battle in space continued. Imperial ships found themselves caught in clouds of simple metal shrapnel, their shields useless against objects moving too slowly to trigger defensive systems, but fast enough to cause damage. "Enemy fleet is reporting multiple system failures," Dan announced. "Their shields are weakening." Admiral Thompson nodded. "Now show them what we learned from their own technology." Earth's ships, now equipped with reversed-engineered Imperial weapons modified with human innovations, opened fire. The Empire's shields, already compromised by primitive attacks, couldn't handle a combined assault. "They're retreating again," Dan reported. 43 enemy ships destroyed, 65 heavily damaged. In the aftermath, recovery teams collected both Imperial debris and Earth's reusable weapons. Nothing was wasted. Every piece of technology, whether human or Imperial, would be studied and adapted. Dr. Walker examined a captured Imperial computer. "Look at this. Their systems are so advanced they can't even conceive of simple mechanical solutions. They've forgotten that sometimes the old ways are the best ways." Major Ross picked up another vacuum mine. "That's their problem. They think being advanced means everything has to be complicated. They never expected an enemy to use both high-tech and low-tech weapons together." As Earth prepared for the Empire's next attack, factories continued producing both sophisticated weapons and simple mechanical devices. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't just their technology or their determination. It was their ability to use everything at their disposal, no matter how primitive it might seem. The Empire had expected to face a primitive species learning to use advanced technology. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that could turn anything, even space debris and farming equipment, into deadly weapons. Their technological superiority had become a cage of their own making, limiting their ability to even comprehend humanity's methods of warfare. The next phase of the war was about to begin, and humanity was ready with even more surprises. The Imperial capital was in chaos. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Emperor called an emergency meeting of all fleet commanders. The humans had to be stopped, and he was sending their greatest weapon, the Imperial dreadnought, Star Crusher. On Earth, preparations for the biggest battle yet were underway. Intelligence reports indicated the massive dreadnought was larger than anything humanity had ever faced, a ship 15 miles long, carrying enough firepower to destroy a planet. "They're finally taking us seriously," General Matt Wilson said, studying the holographic battle plans. "But they're still thinking like an empire, not like humans." In the Mars shipyards, hidden from Imperial spy satellites, Earth's engineers put the finishing touches on their secret weapon. Project Director Kate Anderson walked through the massive hangar, looking at the strange ships taking shape. "Are you sure this will work?" asked her assistant. "The Empire expects us to build bigger ships to fight their dreadnought," she replied. "Instead, we built smaller ones, much smaller." The Star Crusher emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, leading a fleet of 2,000 ships. Its massive form blocked out entire star clusters from view. Following established Imperial doctrine, it moved to take up position for a direct assault on Earth. Admiral Thompson watched from the new Earth Command Center buried deep under the Pacific Ocean. "All ships execute Operation Swarm." From hidden bases across the solar system, thousands of ships emerged, but they weren't the large warships the Empire expected. Instead, they were ships barely bigger than fighter craft, each crewed by only 2 people. "What is this?" demanded the Imperial Grand Admiral from the Star Crusher's bridge. "They face our mightiest weapon with toys." The small Earth ships moved in patterns that seemed random to Imperial tacticians. Their computers couldn't predict the humans' movements because each ship was acting independently, following their pilots' instincts rather than programmed battle plans. "Deploy the gravity weapon," ordered the Grand Admiral. The Star Crusher's main weapon powered up, a device capable of creating artificial gravity wells strong enough to crush ships. But as the weapon fired, the human ships scattered in all directions, moving too quickly and unpredictably to be caught. "Impossible," the Grand Admiral shouted. "Nothing can escape the gravity weapon." But the humans had studied Imperial technology well. Their small ships used modified versions of the Empire's own engines, stripped down and overcharged to achieve speeds that would kill any Imperial pilot. "Now," Thompson commanded. The human ships suddenly converged on the Star Crusher from all directions. Each small ship carried a single weapon, a modified version of the vacuum mines that had proved so effective before. As they approached, Imperial gunners found themselves overwhelmed by too many targets moving too erratically to track. "Their shields are too strong for our weapons," Kate radioed from her command ship. "Initiate Phase 2. The small ships began attaching themselves to the Star Crusher's hull like remoras on a shark. Each one anchored itself with powerful magnets, then activated its special cargo. Not a weapon, but a device that disrupted the enemy ship's shield frequency in its immediate area. Hull breaches across all decks. An Imperial officer reported in panic. "The shields are failing in thousands of small spots." The Grand Admiral watched in horror as his mighty dreadnought was swarmed by ships he could barely see on his screens. The Star Crusher's weapons were useless. Designed to destroy large targets, they couldn't lock onto the tiny ships crawling across its surface. "Launch the final phase," Thompson ordered. From behind Mars, Earth's actual warships appeared. With the Star Crusher's shields compromised by thousands of tiny disruptions, their weapons found their marks. The mightiest ship in the Imperial fleet began breaking apart. "All ships, clear the blast radius," Kate commanded. The small ships detached and scattered as the Star Crusher's power core went critical. The explosion lit up the solar system like a new sun. When it faded, the Empire's greatest weapon was gone, and their supporting fleet was in retreat. In the aftermath, Thompson looked at the casualty reports. They had lost ships, but far fewer than expected. The Empire's greatest weapon had fallen not to superior firepower, but to humanity's willingness to try the unexpected. "They'll be back," Kate said, watching the recovery operations. "Yes," Thompson agreed. "But now they know they can bleed. And bleeding empires make mistakes." The battle marked a turning point in the war. The Empire had lost not just a mighty ship, but their aura of invincibility. Humanity had proved that even the mightiest enemy could fall to unconventional tactics and determined resistance. 6 months after the destruction of the Star Crusher, humanity was no longer defending. They were attacking. Using captured Imperial ships and their own modified vessels, Earth's forces pushed into Imperial space, targeting supply lines and communication hubs. Colonel Frank Miller stood on the bridge of his captured Imperial cruiser, now renamed Earth's Vengeance. His crew had painted the golden hull dark gray, and the Imperial insignia had been replaced with Earth's new Space Force logo. "Another Imperial outpost ahead," reported his navigation officer. "They're still transmitting standard Imperial codes." Miller smiled. "Send the codes we captured. Let's see if they're still working." The Empire's greatest strength, its standardization across thousands of worlds, had become a weakness. Once humans cracked their codes and protocols, they could slip through Imperial defenses almost undetected. On the Imperial border world of Nexus 7, the local Imperial governor watched in horror as his defense fleet was destroyed not by warships, but by what appeared to be civilian cargo vessels. The human ships had hidden their weapons inside fake cargo containers, bypassing planetary scanners designed to detect military vessels. "How do we fight an enemy that doesn't follow any rules of warfare?" he asked his staff before surrendering. Back on the Earth's Vengeance, Miller received an unexpected transmission. It came from representatives of the Crawl, one of the Empire's subjected species. They had watched humans fight and wanted to learn. "Your ways of war," the Crawl leader said through the translator, "they are different. You fight with creativity, not just strength. Teach us." More messages came from other conquered worlds. Species that had lived under Imperial rule for centuries saw hope in humanity's successes. Earth's military leaders began sharing their tactical knowledge, teaching others how to fight using improvised weapons and unexpected strategies. In a secret meeting on a neutral world, Admiral Thompson met with representatives from 20 former Imperial slave species. "The Empire's strength is their unity," he explained. "But that unity comes from control, not cooperation. We'll show you how to fight differently." The rebellion spread faster than the Empire could contain it. Worlds that had been peaceful subjects for generations suddenly erupted in resistance. They didn't fight like the Empire expected, with large armies and direct confrontations. Instead, they used human tactics, guerrilla warfare, improvised weapons, and unpredictable attacks. On the former Imperial Fortress world of Centaurid Prime, now a human-forward base, Dr. Walker supervised the distribution of his latest invention. These look like standard Imperial communication devices, he told the rebel leaders, but they can override Imperial control systems. Their own technology will turn against them. The Empire's response was predictable. They sent larger fleets, bigger weapons, but they were fighting shadows. When their ships arrived at rebel worlds, they found nothing to fight. The resistance would melt away, only to strike elsewhere. Status report. Miller asked his intelligence officer during their latest raid. 3 more sectors have declared independence from the Empire. Their defensive lines are stretched thin trying to respond to simultaneous uprisings on 50 worlds. The Empire had never faced this kind of warfare. They couldn't adapt fast enough to counter threats that kept changing. Every time they developed a defense against one human tactic, Earth's forces would switch to something completely different. In Earth's new Forward Command Center, Thompson reviewed the latest strategic updates. Human ships now operated freely in Imperial space, striking military targets and freeing enslaved worlds. The Empire's mighty fleets were scattered, trying to be everywhere at once and succeeding nowhere. The Empire is falling back to their core worlds, reported his strategic officer. They're abandoning their outer territories. Then it's time for the final phase, Thompson said. Send word to all our allies. Tell them to prepare for the push to the Imperial capital. The Empire had started this war thinking they were fighting one primitive world. Instead, they found themselves facing a revolution that spread across their entire domain. Humanity hadn't just fought back. They had shown others how to fight too. As Miller's ship prepared for another raid, he looked at his crew, a mix of humans and freed alien species working together. The Empire thought they were invincible because they were united, he said. We showed the galaxy a better way to unite, through freedom and shared knowledge. The war was entering its final stage, and the Empire was about to learn its hardest lesson, yet about humanity's determination to win. The Imperial Palace shook as another explosion rocked the capital world. The Emperor, who had ruled over 10,000 systems for 2 centuries, watched in disbelief as his mighty empire crumbled around him. 15 more core worlds have fallen, reported his trembling advisor. The humans, they're not just defeating our forces. They're turning our own people against us. In the space above the Imperial capital, the remnants of the once mighty Imperial fleet formed a defensive ring. They expected a massive human attack force. What they got instead was much worse. General Robert Taylor, commanding Earth's lead assault fleet, looked at his tactical display. Begin Operation Ghost Storm. Across Imperial space, thousands of automated drones activated. These simple machines, built from salvaged Imperial parts, began broadcasting false fleet signatures. The Imperial detection grid lit up with hundreds of phantom invasions. They're splitting their forces, observed Captain Jane Cooper from her stealth ship. Just as planned. The Empire's remaining ships scattered, trying to respond to threats that didn't exist. Their rigid command structure, designed for controlling vast territories, couldn't adapt to an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. On the freed world of Nexus 7, now a human-forward base, Dr. Walker activated his latest creation. The Imperial Communication Network is now ours, he announced. Every transmission they send, we can intercept and alter. The Empire's military commanders began receiving conflicting orders. Some got urgent calls for help that didn't exist. Others received retreat commands that never came from their superiors. In their confusion, they fell back to their training, which was exactly what the humans expected. Look at them, Miller said from the bridge of Earth's vengeance. They're forming standard defensive formations. They still don't understand. His ship led a fleet of converted civilian vessels straight through a gap in the Imperial defenses. Behind them came ships crewed by freed alien species, each using tactics they'd learned from humans. The Empire's standardized defense plans, unchanged for centuries, couldn't handle multiple enemies fighting in completely different ways. In the Imperial War Room, the Grand Admiral watched his tactical display in horror. How are they coordinating these attacks? There's no pattern, no logic to their movements. But there was logic, human logic. Each fleet acted independently, making decisions based on the situation rather than following rigid plans. The Empire's powerful but inflexible military machine was being torn apart by enemies who refused to fight the way they were supposed to. "Their core defense grid is down," reported Cooper. "The rebel fleets we trained are hitting their command centers. The freed species are using their knowledge of Imperial installations to strike critical points." The Empire had spent centuries building perfect defenses against traditional attacks, but they couldn't defend against enemies who turned their own systems against them. Their communication networks carried false orders. Their automated defenses targeted phantom ships. Their mighty warships chased sensor ghosts while the real attack came from unexpected directions. "Imperial forces are surrendering in sectors 12 through 20, reported Taylor's communication officer. "The freed species are taking control of their own worlds." The Empire's structure was collapsing from within. Centuries of rigid control and standardization had left them unable to adapt. Every procedure they followed, every standard response they made, had been studied and countered by human strategists. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor received the final reports. His mighty space fleets were in chaos. His ground forces were being overwhelmed by rebels using human tactics. His own citizens were rising up, using techniques taught by Earth's military advisors. "How?" he demanded. "How could one primitive species do this to us?" The answer came in a transmission from Admiral Thompson. "You built an empire on control and conformity. We built our civilization on adaptation and innovation. You fought the way you've always fought. We fought differently every time. That's why you lost." As the human fleets closed in on the capital, the Empire's last defenders fought bravely but hopelessly. They couldn't counter tactics they couldn't predict. They couldn't fight enemies who refused to follow the rules of war they understood. The Empire's 1,000-year reign was ending, not with an epic final battle, but with confusion and collapse. They had started this war expecting to teach humanity their place in the galaxy. Instead, humanity had taught the galaxy how to be free. The Imperial throne room's massive doors, untouched for centuries, burst open. General Taylor led a mixed group of human and alien soldiers inside, where the Emperor sat waiting on his golden throne. "You've won," the Emperor said simply, "though I still don't understand how." Admiral Thompson, who had coordinated the final assault, stepped forward. "You lost the moment you threatened Earth. We didn't just fight your ships, we fought your entire way of thinking." Around them, the Imperial capital was transforming. The rigid order of the Empire was being replaced by something new. Former slave species worked alongside humans, turning the symbols of imperial power into centers of learning and cooperation. "Your empire lasted 1,000 years, Thompson continued, "but it was built on forcing everyone to be the same. That was your weakness. Humanity's strength comes from our differences, our ability to think in new ways." In orbit above the capital, Miller watched from Earth's vengeance as ships from 100 freed worlds arrived. They weren't coming to fight. They were coming to build. Each species brought their own knowledge, their own ways of solving problems. "Look at their ship designs," Miller said to his mixed crew of humans and aliens. "Each one is different, built for their own needs, not forced to follow imperial standards. That's what freedom looks like." In what was once the Imperial Military Academy, Dr. Walker set up a new kind of school. Here, species from across the galaxy shared their knowledge. Former Imperial officers learned alongside their previous subjects, discovering that there were countless ways to solve problems. The Empire taught everyone to think the same way. Walker explained to his first class, "We're teaching you to think for yourselves." The transition wasn't always smooth. Some Imperial worlds resisted change, clinging to the old ways, but they found themselves facing not just human forces, but a coalition of species who had learned to fight for their freedom. "Let them resist," Captain Cooper said during a peacekeeping mission. "Every time they fight us, they learn. Every time they lose, they understand a little more about why their old ways failed." In the former Imperial Palace, now the Council of Free Worlds, representatives from Earth met with leaders from across the galaxy. They weren't building a new empire. They were creating something that had never existed before. "Each world governs itself," Thompson explained to the assembly. "We share knowledge, trade, and help each other, but no one forces their way of life on others. That's what the Empire never understood." The changes spread across the galaxy. Imperial technology, once restricted to the ruling elite, was shared freely. But it was change, improved by minds that thought differently. Human innovation combined with alien knowledge created new possibilities. "The Empire's weapons were impressive," Miller said, watching a demonstration of new defensive systems. "But look what happens when everyone works together, bringing their own ideas. We're not just stronger, we're smarter." On Earth, the victory celebration was unlike anything in human history. Ships from 100 worlds filled the sky, each design unique, each representing a species that had learned to fight and win their freedom. "We didn't just win a war," General Taylor told the crowd. "We showed the galaxy a new way to live." The Empire thought making everyone the same made them strong. "We proved that our differences make us stronger." The Emperor, now simply a citizen of a free world, watched from his new home as the galaxy transformed. "I thought we were invincible," he told his guards. No longer guards, really, but teachers showing him a new way to live. "But you didn't just defeat our weapons, you defeated our entire way of thinking." In the decades that followed, the galaxy changed more than it had in the 1,000 years of Imperial rule. Every world, every species brought something unique to their new alliance. They faced challenges, solved problems, and grew stronger together. The Empire had tried to conquer humanity. Instead, humanity had shown the galaxy how to be free, not through force or control, but by embracing the very things the Empire had feared: change, difference, and the strength that comes from thinking in new ways. The war was over. The age of the Empire had ended, and across the galaxy, species that had once lived in fear now looked to the stars and saw not conquerors, but friends, teachers, and allies in a new age of freedom and discovery.